Welcome to PCB Chat, where we talk with experts across the printed circuit design, manufacturing, and electronic supply chain fields. I'm Mike Buteau, president of the PCEA. Today's guest is Wally Rhines of the ESD Alliance. ESD Alliance is part of the Semiconductor Equipment and Materials International organization, and Wally is, of course, well known for his long tenure as CEO of Mentor Graphics. He joins us each quarter to share the latest electronic design automation data. The quarterly ESD Alliance report covers sales of semiconductor tools, PCB and MCM design software, related IP and services, and employment. Happy New Year, Wally. It's good to see you.
Happy New Year to you too, Mike. Glad to be here.
So a lot has changed since we last spoke. We have a new administration, administrations in place or pending, I guess, all across North America. Dozens of new IC fab starts. TSMC has started producing 4-nanometer chips in the U.S., which is a first. And lots of export control mandates are being handed down. So it's a lot can happen in just a couple of months, huh?
It's true. A lot of change. In fact, we saw our first naming of an entity of an EDA company in China, the largest one. So this is really evolving rapidly.
Let's turn to the latest results from the ESD Alliance. And these are for the third quarter 2024, which ended October 31st, and are released on January 14th, 2025. Now, most of the categories you track showed healthy gains, and the overall market was up big too. Could we start with PCB and MCM tools and just kind of roll out from there?
Sure. PCB and multi-chip modules had a respectable growth, 5.8%, and they had closed out the year 2023 at almost 1.6 billion, and we're over that now, and the four-quarter moving average is at that level. So it's good, but it's not as rapid a growth as we've seen in the very recent quarters, which were closer to 10% than they were to 5%.
Correct. Although I do note that the third quarter, while it's often the best period of the year for PCB and MCM design tools, the 451 million that was reported for the quarter, that's an all-time single quarter record, right?
I believe so, yes. So nothing to sneeze at, as I said, respectable growth. And third quarter seasonally is not necessarily the best quarter, although the comparison is versus third quarter of last year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, on the downside, it looks like IC design and verification tools took a hit. Anything that we should be concerned about there other than, the fact that it was down? I mean, is that seasonality or is there something else at play?
I think it's really hard to attach much significance to a single quarter for anything. But I think if you look more broadly, the 8.8% growth for the worldwide EDA industry, while strong, is somewhat below the four-quarter moving average. That is, the last year, the growth rate has averaged 13.7%. Now we're at 8.8%. Most businesses would be delighted to have those numbers, but we've gotten used to mid-double digits for EDA over the last 2 years. So it's a little bit of a slowing down of the rapid growth rate we were seeing before.
Well, I'm greedy, but even so, I'm not expecting double-digit gains every quarter. That's for sure.
Yeah, it would be nice, but I don't think that's sustainable.
The services revenue continues to outpace everything else, just at least on a growth percentage.
Yeah, really remarkable. We saw 45% growth compared to the same quarter last year. That's remarkable. In fact, that's one of the few that is higher than the four-quarter moving average. Services have been averaging a very healthy 31%. Now we have a quarter with 45%, and you have to ask, is there significance there? And I'd say there may be. Traditionally, services is a leading indicator for the EDA industry. People use more services when they can't achieve all they need to with design work with their employees in-house, and they go outside to augment that. They go outside for training, many other things. But you don't see growth rate like this unless people are being stressed to complete the work they want to complete with the existing resources. It's also a leading indicator. When you see it weaken, it usually means they're pulling work in-house. So I have to look at these numbers and say people don't seem to be worried about a downturn anytime soon, at least in terms of demand for more design work.
Got it. On a geographical basis, we have this sort of splintering between the East and the West right now. Looks like the Americas and Europe grew, and Japan and Asia slipped. Can we attribute that to anything in particular that you can see?
Well, this is somewhat unusual. It's sort of a shifting of the total momentum, and I guess you'd have to say that is, if continued, a mega trend. Traditionally, the Asia-Pacific region in the last number of years has been the driver, almost always number one. Now it isn't at all. In fact, it was essentially flat, 0.7%. For this quarter versus a year ago. And even the 4-quarter moving average, thanks to weakness in China in recent quarters, is down to a total for APAC of only 11%. Not bad, but still lower. And it's not just China that's causing this effect. In the current quarter, the weakest was actually Korea, down about 30%. And China also was down, but not quite as much. And that was all in EDA tools, not in IP. So the total China number was down 4.4%, and the total Korea number was down 31%. The growth rate was minus 31% compared to the same quarter last year. But that was offset by strength in India and Taiwan. India up a remarkable 64%, Taiwan 20%. So the net for the PAC Rim came out at, as I indicated, relatively flat in total.
Now, the CHIPS Act, of course, in the U.S. and in Europe have gotten a lot of publicity, and certainly there's been, plenty of dollars that have been spread out, but that's really tied to foundries and not to design tools. If we're going to divine anything here, could we forecast some broad improvements in the areas that are getting lots of investment dollars, or because where design takes place is often in a different location than where the chips are actually built and the boards are actually built, is there generally just not much of a relationship there?
It'd be hard to find correlation with much of anything. First of all, the dollars, while having been announced, are yet to be deployed. A number of strategic directions taken there for how the funds are being allocated that don't necessarily point to a lot of new design work. So I'd be surprised if you see a significant impact. And as you say, the actual design work for most companies typically has at least some participation from offshore resources. So there again, there's the effect on U.S. employment may or may not occur.
We were talking about employment was up again year over year, but down sequentially. That hasn't happened much in the past several years.
That's true, but it was so strong overall, 4.5% as an increase. I think the fact that was down 1.2% compared to the prior quarter is probably a level of quarterly granularity that we shouldn't place a lot of credence in. The fact is, employment in the EDA industry by the reporting companies for this report is steadily growing and actually has consistently grown in the past, and that's continuing.
Well, I look at the overall market and PCB in particular, and I see plenty to celebrate there. Anything else jump out at you this quarter before we come to a close?
Well, it's always interesting to look at the specific categories in terms of printed circuit board design, as I look down the list, what made up that 5.8% growth, the strongest one was IC package design, which is encouraging. I think, in the past, we don't capture all the package design revenue in this survey because a lot of people put it in the general purpose PCB router category. So, the fact that number grew quite a bit, and a lot of strength in library data management and PCB analysis tools. The weakest one in the category was physical layout tools, down about 10%. So sort of a mixture, but I think what I look for is how well the adoption growing for PCB tools for people who are going into multi-chip module design or the multi-die per interposer design, that kind of thing. That's bound to be a growing category.
Well, with some of the previously announced acquisitions and mergers that are about to take place, so, Synopsys and Ansys, Siemens-Altair, of course, that's going to, consolidate some of the landscape there. But I'm wondering in particular about the Renesas-Altium. Will that change the way that those data are reported so that the sales will all now be tied to or attributable to Japan? Or are the design tool sales specific to the region in which they are used? Okay, so if the sale was to a U.S. company, then they'll continue to report it as a design tool sale in the U.S.
To the extent the companies know, they report their revenue by the entity that takes possession. So if it's a Korean company, it shows up in Korea. If it's a U.S. company, it shows up in the U.S. unless information is provided that indicates that the tools are actually being bought for another region.
So we can't expect, in all likelihood, to see much change in the geographical distribution just on the basis of those large mergers.
No, and the fact is that the Ansys revenue is probably more heavily U.S. and Europe weighted than the average for IC design. We haven't actually had Ansys as a reporting company in the past, so that will now give us additional information. But the principal integrated circuit design tool that they have is for power analysis that came from a previous acquisition, and a little revenue, we hope, from IC package design and characterization. And so that'll be additional data, probably not material to our overall numbers, but at least it will expand the base of information we get.
Well, more is better in my opinion, but what do you do insofar as ensuring that as a new company comes on board and starts reporting into the ESD Alliance, how far back do you ask them to provide revenues so that it doesn't throw off all the year-over-year data?
Yeah, we try to get the prior 2 years. We don't always succeed, but that's what we try to do.
Got it. Okay, Wally. Well, knock on wood that 2025 turns out, much in the same way as 2024 did, and I'm looking forward to talking with you again next quarter.
It's looking positive, Mike. I'll look forward to talking with you then. Thanks.
Great.